It would be really helpful to understand our listeners' behavior if we could actually watch them while they listen to our show. Guess what? We can! Hello and welcome to another podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. All this week I've been talking about metrics for podcasters because we maybe sometimes focus on the wrong things. Monday I talked about obsessing over downloads and how that may not be a good idea. Yesterday I spoke of social media metrics and how you're probably not doing they're probably causing you more stress than they should as well. And today I'm going to talk about spying on your listeners. Ooh, and that sounds like a bad idea, Evo. Yeah, and then also tomorrow I got another show. So when I talk about spying on your listeners, look, you want to spy on your listeners. Anybody would. If you want people to consume your content, you want people to take the kinds of action you want them to take, it would be great if we lived in a perfect world where we could just watch them. Invite them over, put them in a room, let's watch what they do. You can do that. I mean, you can pay lots of money to do that. People will go out and do a customer study, and they'll sit them in a room and they'll watch all the activities they do. But we don't have to do that. Because as podcasters, probably the biggest friend to podcasting is Apple. Say what you will, doesn't matter. Apple commands the lion's share of podcast consumption, and they have since 2005. To be really honest. But Apple, not long ago, gave us podcast analytics. And I'm amazed more people don't take advantage of them. Now, maybe you're a smart podcaster and you've seen it all about podcast analytics. Great. But I bet you haven't. Or I bet if you're like most podcasters, and I'm raising my hand on this one, you look at these occasionally. But getting the podcast analytics data is, in my opinion, of all the things I've talked about thus far, way more valuable to understanding the growth of your show than things like downloads, which are just, remember, software accessing your media files. And a lot more important than chasing social media metrics. So let's talk about what this actually is. Your show has to be an Apple podcast, which clearly it is, because that's where, if you're not, your show's not an Apple podcast, you're probably not playing along. Number one. Number two, you have to have access to the Apple Podcasts login data where they being Apple, where they provide this information. And what they do is they give us, the podcasters, some nice detail about what's happening when the app plays our media file. Let me change the way I say that. When the person pushes play, but it also tracks when they push stop, fast forward, those sorts of activities, when you can really get behavior of what's happening inside of the app. No, it's not everyone. It's not designed to be everyone. This is just a select group of people that Apple is tracking. That means they're using the Apple Podcast app on a certain operating system. So it's a subset of your audience, but it's a valuable subset of your audience, because even if you have 100 downloads or so, you should at least have people using the Apple Podcast app to look. So even if you're getting data on 10, 20, 100 devices accessing your content, it's really valuable data. So here's what it tells you. I just said it a minute ago, but let me let that sink in. Let me say it one more time so you get it. You're going to get a report per episode that lays out a timeline of your episode from timestamp 0 till timestamp the end. So in my case, it's somewhere around the 9.5, 10-minute mark is the end. And then you will get to see a chart of the percentage of people, the percentage of devices tracked by Apple that are listening at that timestamp. So here's what happens. As the continuation of play goes, so as we go from right to left, you naturally see that chart go down. That line that you're seeing that goes across, representing percentage, will naturally drop. Now, if you're getting 100% a solid line all the way across, congratulations. Or that may mean your audience is so small that it's you. You're the one tracking and you listen to your entire episode because you're a really smart podcaster and you listen all the way through, even to your own show. But assuming that's not you, chances are you're going to have somewhere 90, 80, 60%, whatever. That's going to make it all the way through. But the great thing about this chart is you can actually go into that chart and put your playhead, because there's a player embedded at the bottom of that chart. And you can put that player wherever. So if you see a drop-off at minute 33, you see a spike down, a little V shape show up on that line. You can move the playhead, there's a player right below that graph, drag that to the beginning of that V, and hit play. And see what it was. It's also a very smart chart because it will show you the number change. So if you had 10 listeners, for example, 10 is the sample size of this episode you're listening to, that you're examining right now. And you see that V in the middle. You may get there and you realize, well, it was 90%, which just means one person stopped listening before they got them. And then it goes down to 80%, which means another person lost. So not super valuable. What one person likes isn't all that important. Maybe it is. Maybe it shows something over time. Who knows? But if you have dozens, or if you have many tens, and maybe even hundreds of people represented on that graph, and you still see a V, now, what do you do about that V? Again, because of the great fact the playhead is right there, you can hit play and find out. What was it you said? What was it that made people skip? Because that's what it means. That V means that they skipped ahead. They fast-forwarded. What's that mean? Why did someone fast-forward? It could be a commercial. It could be a segment of the show that you think is fascinating that people don't. It could be a lot of things. You don't know until you go listen to what happened in that V. There's another realistic thing. You may get there and notice that that you have only 60% of the people listening to your show 5 minutes in. Hey, that's a problem. What that could mean to you is that you gave all the value in the first 5 minutes. Great, if in fact you did that. But if not, it could mean that your content is being consumed by people who either have wrong expectations, incorrect expectations of what, and they bailed out after 5 minutes when those expectations weren't met, or perhaps not the right people are listening to your show. Maybe you've done a big marketing push and you've got people listening. Great. But they stop listening after 5 or 6 minutes. That's probably not what you want. Now, maybe for me it's fine, but I've got a 9-minute show. You may have a 20-minute, 30-minute, hour-and-a-half long show. If you're losing half of your audience or a good portion of your audience in 5 minutes, that's problematic. Don't dismiss this data because it looks weird. I know it's easy to track downloads, and it's easy to see how many people thumbed up your stuff on social media. It's a lot more difficult to look at this data because it doesn't make the same amount of sense. It's not an easy number to put my hand on. I got 13,000 downloads last week. No. This is you being self-reflective. This is you understanding, are people enjoying the content I put out? Is it resonating? Am I doing the things I need to do that made these 10 people, these 150 people who I'm looking at right now, are they happy? You can gauge their happiness by whether they finished the content or not. Apple Podcasts, looking at listener data, very important. Tomorrow, when the show airs, I'll be giving you the most important metric of all that you should be tracking heavily for your podcast. Yes, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. Can't wait? Need a pro in your corner who can help you with things like this? Get in touch with me, evo@podcastlaunch.pro. You can also go to podcastlaunch.pro to check out a list of all the services I offer for my clients, and I shall be back tomorrow with the wrap of this mini-series and another podcast, Pontifications. Cheers!